This episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds.
You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood, today we are in Eustis, Florida, on the King Grove Organic Farm with Hugh Kent. Hugh, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be here. We're overlooking 20 acres of organic blueberries. So thanks for having us. And can you give us a brief history of you and the farm?
Sure. Thanks for being here. This is an old farm by Florida standards. It's was established by John King, so the farm still carries his name, and he homesteaded the property in 1874, moved with his wife and two little kids from Buffalo, New York to Eustis, Florida, and went by steamship actually from Buffalo to Savannah, Georgia, and horseback from Savannah to here. So not that long ago in time, but life was very different then. Mm-hmm. And he moved to this property, and the deal with the government was that you would build a house and farm the land for 10 years, and then a provisional deed would become permanent. So that's what John King did, and he built this old house and then started a citrus grove all around it, and got the permanent deed in 1884, and then sold it to one of my relatives in 1890, Willis Alger. And he had a little bit of money because his father was the owner of the Alger Iron Works in Boston. And one of my uncles liked to say sold cannons to both sides during the Civil War and made a small fortune. And then he came down here and bought the property from John King in 1890, and then Willis borrowed money from one of his nieces, Dorothy Kemp, who was a wonderful person, really interesting, one of my grandmother's sisters, and she was an early female physician, went from Johns Hopkins University, and she was married to an academic psychiatrist who was a very interesting guy. Anyway, she lent money to her uncle, and to the point where he said, well, just loan me a little more money and I'll give you the deed. And she said, I don't want an orange grove in Florida. I'm a physician. I live in Long Island. And, but that's how she got it. She had no kids, and she was an incredibly welcoming person. She welcomed all of her sisters families and their children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and cousins, and so this place was always special to me because I grew up around my extended family, and a lot of them were farmers in New Hampshire, and they would come down here in the spring, and we'd get to fish and learn things about the land. So it's been a cherished property for a long time, and always been an orange grove. My mother inherited it in 1980 from Dorothy, and she had it until she had to sell it in 2003. And one of my sisters and I got a money guy. We got an investor, and we put together a proposal, and ultimately ended up buying it for a full asking price. That was because this is family, right? So that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought it in 2004, and with the intention of realizing that we'd have to sell some of it in order to pay off the acquisition loans. And we did that. We ended up selling about half of the land and having enough money left over after getting development approvals. We ended up selling it as conservation land, which was wonderful. So that we got the benefit of the rise in the market down here during the early 2000s, and we're able to retire the debt and start the farm, which is what I wanted to do from the outset. So we're in the old house, and we're on what was mainly John King's original farm, but instead of citrus now, with citrus greening and the difficulties that the industry has had this far north in Florida, we decided to grow blueberries and started that about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit to the McLeans about citrus greening and definitely got the background of that. So when you were coming down here, were you helping out with citrus work, and was that your intention when you bought the place?
That was the allure for it for me growing up as a kid. Citrus Grove is a beautiful farm. There's really no smell that's nicer than orange blossoms in the spring in Florida. It's something that stays in your memory somewhere, and I got to experience that over and over as I was growing up in the Northeast. I would come down here in the spring, and then later on, as I got older and stupider, I came down here during the summer and went up there in the winter. So I spent part of my life doing that back and forth, and ultimately I decided I'd really like to live here. I enjoy Central Florida. It's a beautiful place. The land's gorgeous. It's not like people are used to seeing in other parts of the state. There's actually some topography here. You probably saw that in Claremont when you were at the McLeans. Rolling hills. Hasn't been destroyed by development yet, and it's the people value the land around here. It's really quite pleasant. It's a nice climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really surprised driving in here how big some of the hills were. When you go 50 miles south, it's pretty much flat, and it's really nice in this area.
We're on a ridge that there's two main ridges that run down the center of the state. And so when you're right in the center of the state, these were, some of the first parts of the ocean that broke the surface. These sand hills that are in the center of the state were, just high parts of the ocean floor at one point, of course. And then as the water receded, this was the first part of Florida to dry out and become something different. And it's not like we're on mountaintop here. But we're 180 feet above sea level, which for the center of Florida is pretty high. I think we're, maybe in the top 10 highest points in peninsular Florida. It's not saying a lot,
okay.
but you're looking at the back here, there's probably 100-foot elevation drop, and lots of lakes in this area. There's about 1,100 lakes in Lake County alone, so right in the middle of the state.
Wow. And when you decided to go the blueberry route, and partially because of greening, you went blueberry. And were you convinced on going organic from day one?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of reasons for that. I did have an understanding from growing up around it of how toxic some of the inputs are in commercial citrus, or at least they used to be. I think there's an argument that they still are. We still have remnants of that in the groundwater around here. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to expose myself to that. I didn't want to expose my family or my people that work for me. And I didn't want to have that relationship to the land. So I knew this is the way I wanted to farm. And it's been really gratifying. Partly because I'm so attached to this particular piece of property, and there's a tremendous amount of wildlife right here, right around the farm. that area you see down there is a wet prairie. There's a lake across the street. There's just a lot going on, and I realized I wanted to farm in relationship to all of this stuff that lives here, not extinguish it and then impose something on it. And I wanted to prove that it can be done that way, or I wanted to be one more little data point in that proof. I'd love people to see what I do and say, yeah, that maybe I can make that work also. Mm-hmm. I'm not a well-heeled visionary, I have to make this work financially in order for it to be an example for other people and to just sustain it myself. So I have to be realistic about it. But we've had good luck with organic blueberries, and we've innovated some things. And I've got machinery that I use here that I had to invent, and we use some processes that I don't think anybody else uses, and I think that's what good agriculture is. And I like to think that I've got a couple of patents on some non-chemical weed control that I'm real excited about, and I think that that's what small family farms can do. They have to do, and that's where I think a lot of agricultural innovation has come from, out of the necessity and out of the innovation that individuals can accomplish. But yeah, that's a long answer to the question. Yeah, I wanted to do organic from the beginning, mm-hmm. and it's gratifying every day. One of the things I didn't realize before I started doing this, you guys probably know about this, but when you're on a piece of land that you know well, the things that live there become familiar to you, and the plants and the animals and the individual animals and critters, they all have, what I've found around here is they have pretty limited ranges. And I know I can find those individuals in particular places at particular times of day. And that's what's interesting to me about dogs, is they're kind of like the liaison to the natural world. So I go out with my dog in the morning, I go out with her at night, and we walk. We've got trails that I've cut all around here through the woods and the wetlands. And so we see the same individuals all the time. She knows them very well. They know to run from her. Some of them don't care. But we get to see this, day in, day out, year after year, and it's hard to imagine farming in a different way now for me.
Mm-hmm. Did you have mentors, or did you have a knowledge of farming organically? Because when you worked on the orange groves here, during when you were younger, that would have been a conventional orange grove, right?
Right.
So where did your knowledge of farming organically come from?
There's that wonderful quote about organic farming, or as my grandfather used to call it, farming.
Yeah.
I just skipped the part where there was a lot of chemistry, synthetic chemistry introduced. So my history goes back to my family, which were all farmers in New Hampshire. And of course, maybe starting in the 50s, they adopted what was the conventional practice then. But prior to that, they had been farming in New Hampshire since the 1600s. And so they had really good understanding of farming, which then was organic farming. There was no distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess some of it is from growing up around the farms in New Hampshire that were the farm, especially in Dover, New Hampshire, that was in my family, where my mother grew up, and my Uncle Hugh, who I'm named for, was a farmer. And then the rest of it I've had to learn. So I'm in awe of my ancestors who did this on a scale with 30 different crops. I do this with one. So I feel like I know how to grow organic blueberries in Florida. That's a pretty limited skill set when you start to think about what these other guys did. So a lot of this, though, has been trial and error for me, a lot of hard lessons and a lot of mistakes. But that's how I learned.
Mm-hmm.
I started with a base, and then
that's really all you need is that base. And in some ways, probably coming with limited conventional background. I know in working with farmers that transition to organic, a lot of times they'll be thinking in that conventional mindset, and be thinking, okay, well, what can I do to replace what I was doing conventionally organically? Whether that's a nitrogen source,
yeah,
or that's a, whatever it is. And they're, like we work a lot with dairy farmers. So they're looking at, well, how can I replace the antibiotics or whatever it was that I was using on the cows with something that's certified organic?
Yeah, how can I find something on the Armory list that works like that? And that's probably getting to be more common, right? Because there's so many biologicals are being certified or being listed now, and there's a lot broader range of
Well, it's kind of interesting to watch that there's definitely more options. And I know I've been working in the organic industry for 8 years now, and just in that short period of time, the amount of products has just ballooned significantly. But working with individual farmers, if they come with that mindset of replacement, usually it's 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there, that they come in with that mindset, they use that mindset, and then over 3 to 5 years, those tools that they felt like they needed when they transitioned start to go out the window, because they realize that, oh, that's not the point here. It's to have a system that is proactive rather than reactive. And it starts, that cycle starts happening. And, you didn't have that background, it sounds like, and had to figure it out.
Right. I was too ignorant. I didn't realize that there were things out there that might work better. But for me, it's been very simple. And it's all soil related. And it's simple because I don't have to understand it. I don't understand it. There's an incredible mix of physics and chemistry and biology that's going on in that soil that nobody understands. I've got a cousin who's part of this New Hampshire farming family, and her dad and my mom grew up on the farm with their brother Hugh, and so this is the Dover farm. She's a PhD plant pathologist at Cornell. She's a professor at Cornell. She's a very bright woman, has been in agriculture her whole life. And I learned something a few years ago when I started this, and I said, Meg, is it really true that you guys only have, you can only identify about 10% of the microbes that are living in soil? And she said, yep, that's optimistic. It's somewhere between 1 and 10%. We don't even have names for them, let alone know what they do. And she's a top scientist there. She knows what she's talking about. So I don't feel bad when I realize that I don't know a lot about what's going on out there. I just have to let Mother Nature work her magic. I have to get out of the way. I have to create biological variety in that soil, and then let the plants pick and choose what they need in that rich, fertile soil. And now, as I've learned and researched it more, I understand the magic of this. It's really profound. It's spiritual. There's 8 billion microbes in a couple spoonfuls of fertile soil. So that's more people than live on the planet. And there's a lot of spoonfuls of soil out just on my little farm. And you just realize how much activity there is, and the complex relationship between the minerals that are in that soil and the exudates on the root tips, and the gathering, the farming that the plant itself does with its roots by sending out the signals to recruit what it needs out of the soil, and the complex relationship of all of the microbes that are active out there. So that's the basis of organic farming. It's certainly the basis of what I do. I'm not smart enough to know the rest of it. I just know that if I make that soil healthy and active, then the plant responds and it's healthy. And it does a tremendous job of fighting off pests. I've just seen the plants get healthier and healthier, even if they're starting to get pretty old. But the science that I've read on it suggests that the system in the plants is sophisticated enough to even change what it's recruiting out of the soil, to change its own chemistry to repel pests. So if it's got a grasshopper on it, it may change its chemistry to repel that grasshopper. And that, to me, is the only thing that explains why I don't have caterpillars anymore. I don't have grasshoppers anymore. I don't have a lot of things that were here bothering my plants when I first started. And I feel like I couldn't, stay up at night and educate myself enough to spray the right things to have that effect without creating deficiencies and problems and inviting in other pests and all kinds of synergistic problems that would result from mixing a lot of things I didn't know what I was doing. So I just concentrated on the soil, and I feel like that is really taking care of the plants well. And then the end product, the berries that are coming off of this farm, are absolutely delicious. If you ever get some, if my wife will unhand some over to you, I'll let you judge. But the taste is fantastic. I'm convinced that the nutritional density follows the taste. I think that these are really healthy berries. I'm looking forward to some testing. We're getting a hold of some people who can test these against some of the more conventionally grown blueberries and the conventionally, I'm going to call these conventional organic now. There's so much of organic berries are coming out of what's essentially hydroponic systems. And they're just feeding them a liquid feed, and they're living in an inert potting material like coconut coir. And they do not have this complex relationship to a healthy soil that plants like this have. So I'm really anxious to show that this isn't just my theory, but there's a real difference in the quality of the food. To me, it just makes sense. Healthy soil means a healthy plant, means a healthy crop, and which means a healthy human that eats it.
Mm-hmm. Did you start out with just a small patch of blueberries, or you didn't plant all 20 acres you planted the 20 acres right out of the gate?
Yeah, it's about 28,000 plants. And when I think about how that was, if I'd known what I was doing, I wouldn't have done that. But they're 2.5 feet apart. So if you stretch it all out, it's about 17 miles of plants. And I know there's a Apopka is 17 miles from here. When I think about, if I got to walk from here to Apopka and stop every 2.5 feet and do something, if I had realized that was the model I was creating, I probably would have quit. But.
So you took the go big or go home to the extreme.
Well, for an individual.
Not big as in agricultural scale today,
yeah, right, exactly.
But for biting off a 20-acre blueberry patch. And how long after you planted them, how many years does it go until you start bearing fruit?
The recommendation down here is to go through a full season and take the flowers off the first year. So when you plant them, you'll actually, the following year, if you plant them in the wintertime, about 14 months later in the spring of the following year, you'll have a crop. And I didn't know enough at the time. I actually picked that crop. The wisdom now is take the flowers off of those plants and let them go another year, just concentrating on vegetative growth and establishment, and then they'll let them fruit after that. But I picked a crop 14 months or so after I planted the farm. I really wanted the money.
Yeah, that's quite an ambitious endeavor.
And like, what have you seen over the years from that start? We were talking about the soil, and just you've seen things get healthier and the berries increase in taste. But what are some examples of just seeing that soil heal itself?
Yeah, that part's fascinating. I don't have any scientific basis for this. This is just another farmer's kind of observation, anecdotal kind of thing. But things grow so fast in this area. Whenever you disturb the ground, you'll get something will come up immediately. Usually it's nutsedge, something that's really aggressive. But you'll get, and a lot of times it's invasive species that are around there in the seed bank. But if you go down below a couple inches and you disturb the soil to that extent, you're of course bringing things up out of the seed bank that have been dormant, bring them close enough to the surface to get the right mix of water and light and oxygen, and they will start to germinate. And anyway, when you initially disturb the land, you'll get a first generation, and then if you leave it undisturbed, sometimes you'll get a second one, and then you'll get a third one. And I think that nature has a way of, if we leave it alone, of creating good soil. Might take eons. We've probably ruined so much soil in the last several decades on the earth that we need to do some things aggressively to get that back. But if, let's say, we all stopped tomorrow and we went to another planet for a while and came back, I think we would see a lot more soil. I think that nature knows what the soil even needs. So I see some nitrogen fixers out here like hairy indigo. There'll be nodules that are in the soil that are fixing nitrogen out of the air. There's other plants that I see crop up just as these generations succeed each other after you disturb soil. And I think there's a real plan at work there. So anyway, when you say, what have I seen? I've seen that happen. So when I disturbed the soil initially, I was overrun with some really aggressive weeds. And then as I gradually got those under control, I started to see some more beneficial plants come up. And then a lot of what I do here is green manure. So I feed my plants what grows in between the rows. And I've watched that change dramatically. And I think as I cut that and get that up on the beds, mulch it, and it's turns into organic matter and food for the plant, I see the mix of weeds out there change, and I think I've seen them get more beneficial to the crop.
So when you talk about mulching the grass, do you just mow the grass and blow it into the bed, or do you take it off and then reintroduce it?
No, it stays out there, but it's a proprietary machine that I put together, and so it does a combination of cutting and mulching and spreading and locating the green manure where I want it. And it's I'd say that I definitely use less and less fertilizer inputs every year because I'm growing a lot of the fertilizer in between the plants. I've certainly use less and less nitrogen each year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's feather meal stuff usually, but that's been fun to watch, and definitely the water holding capacity has changed. So I use less water, I use less fertilizer. This is a very sandy soil, so everything's relative. I would not want to compare my soil to some of the some parts of the country or some farms that have got really good topsoil, but mine's way better than I started with, and I think it gets better each year. So I start with what I've got, and I do the best I can, and I like to think I'm a little bit better a farmer every year.
Do you plant a cover crop or like a green manure crop, or is it a native?
I have. I've done both. At the moment I'm falling back on whatever wants to come up out there, and some of them I have to get rid of. I have to hand pull some of them that are really aggressive, and there's some African invasive grasses that I have to pay attention to. But a lot of what's growing out there now, I think, is relatively benign as a weed. It's it's all weeds, just a plant out of place. So it's there's a lot more coexistence of weeds out here than you'll find on any other conventional or organic blueberry farm in this area. I'm convinced, because the academics will tell you can't do it this way. That blueberries just are not a competitive enough plant to do well. But I've found that's not true. They're doing very well. My yields compare pretty favorably to conventional blueberry farms.
So when you mulch that into the row, that also suppresses the weed pressure right around the stalk, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm building up a thatch basically underneath the plants.
Do berries like an acidic soil?
They do. Yeah.
And did you early on put stuff out there to lower your pH?
I did, and I do some of that. There's a nice combination, the dual benefit that I get from using vinegar as a sometimes herbicide with my own mix of additives in there. Like every organic farmer seems to have a favorite recipe. What do you put in your vinegar? It's all vinegar based, but I found something that's effective, and so that when I have to use that, which is up where I can't reach with mowers, then I'm doing two things at once. I'm doing some burn down on some weeds, and I'm also acidifying the soil.
Mm-hmm. Are you worried about that your weed killer, if it hits the plant, the blueberry plant, it won't damage the blueberry plant?
No, it will. It
Okay.
will. So you got to be careful with that.
Okay.
But once the plant's hardened off pretty well, once you've got some woody growth down there at the base of the plant, it's I've had some pretty good luck with the formula I use.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't had too many problems.
How long does a blueberry plant last?
Well, that's a great question. I think it depends on the growing system, and most people will tell you in this region these are southern highbush blueberries. There are some rabbit eyes that are grown here, but most of them are further north. Those last quite a long time. But these southern highbush varieties are maybe a 7 or 8 year plant. I'm coming up on year 10, and I think maybe I'm optimistic I can at least double that. The plants seem very healthy. They're producing well. We prune them pretty hard every year, and that's one of the things you learn by trial and error, what works best. But I'm hoping to get close to 20 years from the plants.
So we'll like the reason that 7 to 8 would be normally accepted is over time, will that blueberry plant die back, or just production will slow down?
Both.
Okay.
Mostly production will slow down, but there is a certain amount of die-off attrition in the field that nobody really understands, and there's kind of a catch-all called stem blight, or oh, you have stem blight, Okay.
The plant died.
It died. Yeah.
Are you planning to expand from more than this 20 acres?
I'd love to. It's all economics. So we're going direct to consumer this year for the first time. We've always been a wholesale farm, but we're selling direct to consumers on the farm, and then we have a delivery truck, and then we're selling UPS shipping throughout the country. So we hope that this is going to bring us enough money to expand. We'll have to wait and see. It's a big change for us to change our marketing so completely.
And they would buy that on your website?
Yes. Our website is kinggrove.com.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And when you originally got started doing wholesale, was that for grocery, primarily retail? Was that what you were originally going into?
Yeah, it's all. This is an interesting topic. I'm sure you've heard it from farmers all throughout the country. And one of the stories of American agriculture really is difficulty farmers have in getting a fair price because of the way food is distributed. And there's no exception for berries in Florida. If you want to sell into retail, you've first got to go through marketers. They don't take title to the fruit. They don't take any risks. They don't have any capital invested. They don't necessarily have any knowledge. And I think that's a real problem. Farmers generally, we tell our kids anyway, that's what you need to make a living. You gotta do the work. You have to do the work that's necessary to gain the knowledge to do what you do. You need to take risk, and you need to have capital invested in it. And we do all those things, and yet the food gets to the stores through people who have a cell phone in their pocket and maybe an office space, and they don't put in capital. They don't take any risk at all. They don't have much knowledge, and yet they seem to be the ones that are thriving. And more and more farms go out of business. So it's a real problem. And to me, it's because there's not a free market. It's not a free market when you have people who control the conduit to the customer. And we have people who love our product, and they're willing. We see what it sells for on the shelf. We could definitely make a living at a price somewhere near that, but it's very hard to get there. Mm-hmm. So we're among the legions of farmers that are saying enough, and we'll either make it or go out of business going direct to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's great that you give people the opportunity to come out, buy the blueberries on the farm. Their kids can see the work that goes into these blueberries instead of just picking up a box at the store. Well, blueberries come from the store. Well, this gives
Yeah.
gives that connection back to the farm and the farmer, which I think is so missing in our society today.
But it's coming back.
It is.
There's definitely been, well, and especially during these COVID times, more and more people have taken up the backyard chickens or the backyard vegetables and kind of putting that, oh man, there was a shortage of meat last year. What do I have to do to make sure I'm secure? Well, that then leads them down the road of what does it take to actually make the food and what goes into it. And the more and more they get exposed to the food they buy in a grocery store, what it takes to actually make that food, the further away they get from it.
Yeah.
And they come to you. That's awesome.
That part really is gratifying. It's very nice to see children out here and see their reaction, and to explain a little bit of, a little bit of a mystery of life. You see, you're out here and kids can see. Well, here's a plant, and we give it some water and a little bit of food and the sun, and it somehow creates this thing that you get to eat. It's fundamental truth in life on the planet. It's a wonderful mystery, and a lot of those processes are too complex for us to understand.
Mm-hmm. Do you have drip line irrigation, or?
I have both overhead and
Okay.
drip. Yeah. I find I use the overhead more than some blueberry farmers because I'm growing my fertilizer too. So I'm growing the green manure that's in between the rows of blueberries. And also I think there's something about there's a really underappreciated aspect to organic farming. I believe the most important nutrient we take in our bodies is water, and what's in it, and sometimes what shouldn't be in it is a real problem. And so I'm happy when I see, I put water out here on this farm. Sometimes I watch it rain, or I turn on the irrigation, and I know that the way I'm farming, I'm part of the cycle that's cleaning water in the Florida aquifer. So I've got 100-foot static water table here, which means I've got basically 100-foot sand filter. And when water hits the surface here and it goes down through there, it's being filtered all the way down to when it hits the water table. If I were putting out some of the conventional chemistry that's been used in Florida over the years, I know I'd be adding to a problem. Mm-hmm. And now I know that as the water cycles through here, I'm actually providing a benefit. It's not something we think about very often, usually, but that's what I think responsible organic farming is. One of the things that it does as a byproduct of the system.
So when I had talked to you a couple weeks ago, you had mentioned you're also involved in the Real Organic Project, along with running the blueberry farm, which we're right in the middle of crazy season here for you, because you mentioned that you make all your money in 8 weeks.
Yeah, I don't normally look like this.
Oh. But
my wife doesn't usually drive that fast.
She went out moving quite fast. So can you tell us a little bit about the Real Organic Project?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Well, I'll tell you my view of it, which, I'm not a lifelong farmer. Been around farmers my whole life, but I've done other things also. But I got introduced to this group of lifelong organic farmers up mainly in the Northeast. And I realized how much the USDA organic label was changing, and I saw what it was doing to my farm and my attempt to make this work. And the short the short story on this is that the USDA is not enforcing the organic regulations the way they were intended or the way they're written. And the result has been an erosion in my mind, certainly, an erosion in the integrity of the USDA organic label. And this has put tremendous pressure on real organic farmers. And a lot of these guys, they're older now, and this has been their life's work, and they're livid. And they got organized into this group, the Real Organic Project, and they have pointed out a lot of these problems, at first very gently. They've had a lot of public input in various forums that the USDA offers to get public input, which they then, mainly have ignored. But their mission is to bring organic back to what it was always intended to be. And that means things like soil-grown vegetables, soil-grown berries. It means pasture-raised dairy. It means poultry that's out on pasture, or at least has some animal welfare standards still incorporated into the system. And we've seen incredible erosion in the organic standards. And my experience with that is that I grow according to the rules. I can read the law. I'm an attorney. When I started doing this, I assume the other producers can read also, and everybody knows what the rules are. But there are a lot of organic berry producers who are violating the law. It's as simple as that. And so I play by the rules, and I'm under tremendous pressure in the marketplace because producers who don't have the same USDA organic label that I have. And side by side on the shelf, there's no way for the consumer to distinguish between these organic berries over here that were grown according to the rules and regulations, and these over here which were given a pass. And that was explained to me by a major supermarket chain buyer, and he said, "Look, Hugh, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what's happening, but I can't hire somebody to stand in my produce section and say these organic blueberries over here are more expensive, but they're worth it, and here's why." That can't happen. And so the Real Organic Project is an effort to educate the public and give them permission to buy food which is otherwise not going to be available. There's a lot of what's in the stores and going throughout the retail chain. The prices are just pushing real organic farms completely out of the picture, and it's depriving the eaters from the option of buying this kind of thing. You can't find it anymore unless you find somebody like me, or you find somebody like Dave Chapman at Longwind Farm, or you find Full Billy Farm, or Long Lady Moon Farms. Or there are a lot of there are now hundreds of certified real organic farms throughout the country, and it's growing very quickly. The intention is to give consumers another label to look at, so they'll see USDA organic on there, but they'll also see an add-on label that says Real Organic Project. And if they look for that, they're going to find a product which is still grown according to the letter and the intention of the law.
How do you balance out calling out the, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. The USDA organic label has grown the organic industry into what it is today. So there's been a benefit of that label, obviously. And there's been some trust built that people know that green seal means that they're buying organic and they're willing to pay more for it. And how do you balance out sending out that message of this isn't exactly the intention behind the label without deteriorating that label?
Exactly. So that's the crux of it. That's a wonderful question. That's the whole dilemma. And the problem is that if you don't tell the truth and you don't call it out, it's going to disappear anyway. So about 90% of the organic tomatoes in this country now are hydroponically grown.
Really?
Yes.
90%?
Yes.
I had no idea.
So if I want to make this very clear, I have deep respect for hydroponic farmers. I respect anybody who can come up with a good growing system, who can invent something new, innovate it, stick through the whole trial and error thing. I really respect that, and I applaud it, and I think hydroponic farming has got its place. But I stop there because it's not organic. It's nowhere near organic. It's nothing to do with organic. Organic is a soil-based system. It's not an inert material where you drip through a chemical broth of fertilizers. It's not a plastic tray. It's not aeroponics. It's not. That's fine, but that's not organic. I think we're going to learn more as science progresses that there's a real distinction in the quality of food it produces. I think there's a real distinction in the taste, but I think that's a reflection of the nutrients also. But anyway, it's this takeover is happening so fast, it's so profound that if we don't say anything, if we don't tell people about it, it's not going to matter anyway. So we'll end up with organic food which is not organic food. And the label will be lost anyway. So and in Europe they don't tolerate this kind of thing. You can't sell hydroponic stuff as organic. They do grow for example, they do grow organic hydroponic tomatoes in Europe, but it's only for export to the U.S. because that's the only place that will allow it to be labeled as organic.
Shocker.
So yeah, so it's a great question, and people in the Real Organic Project are really sensitive to that. It's like, how can you guys blow up the label that that brought us all this, that allowed family farming to continue in this country, and that's why it's an add-on label. It's one of the reasons we're not saying it's a different new label. It's USDA Organic. Plus, it's the Real Organic Project. But I guess, it's easy for me, and you can sort of hear an edge in my voice probably, but this is a really difficult situation, and sometimes, I wonder how angry am I allowed to be? How indignant am I allowed to be? I invested all my material assets in this farm, and I made it work. And the reason why it's under financial pressure is because there's people out there who aren't complying with the law, and the USDA is not enforcing it. So they're growing under a system which they shouldn't be allowed to be labeled organic. And since my ox is being gored now, berries are one of the first crops which are seeing this huge takeover of hydroponics. It's easy for me to say, so what about the organic label? I'm in berries, it's not going to matter. Why defend a label that doesn't mean anything? And maybe it's not that way with all other crops, but it's definitely getting there. So tomatoes, I think, were first, and then berries, cucumbers, peppers. It's coming. It's coming very, very quickly when you see the scale of some of these hydroponic farms.
And just an observation is that I don't think you're the only one. Well, certainly, obviously, you have a group there. But regenerative agriculture has been a big buzzword over the last couple of years. And I think the thinking behind that is regenerate the soil. And that there's been some backlash on organic because, is organic regenerative? I think the basis for regenerative ag is in organic systems, but certainly not all organic farms are regenerative. And I think you're kind of saying the same thing. And the hard part here is, how does everybody that sees that happening get on the same path so that there isn't a bunch of different label add-ons that confuse consumers. That's have you seen that as a hard part to overcome as well?
Yes. And the problem, I think, with the term regenerative is that it doesn't have any specific meaning. Organic does, but it's being eroded, and it's already been eroded dramatically. So the Real Organic Project's intention is to bring organic back to what it was always intended to be. And basically, if the USDA is not willing to enforce its own laws, to educate consumers so that they will see the distinction. And that's, if you read the National Organic Standards, the statutes and the regulations which established it, I think any fair reading of that shows you just how important soil is. Soil is the basis for organic farming. And that's what regenerative agriculture is about, and caring for soil and stewardship of the land is what is all throughout all of the wording of the laws and the regulations in the USDA program. It's just not being enforced. It's just being ignored because there are some people that have got, some organizations that have got enough political power to change the rules as they apply to them.
I was just going to say, was it just lobbying by the hydroponics industry that got that passed through?
Yes. If you go to the Real Organic Project website, you'll see a pretty complete description. The senators who were involved, the lobbyists who were involved, they have to be identified, and they're identified, and then the chief proponents of the changes, and they changed. It was the introduction of hydroponics and acceptance of hydroponics, and then also erosion of animal welfare standards were part of the same changes that happened at the same time. But yeah, it's hard for people who actually appreciate organic farming or practiced it, and like we were joking about before, it used to all be organic farming. It's only recently that we had conventional farming. Agrochemicals didn't really, get a hold until after World War II. So what was done before that was how farming was always done. And then we sort of relegated it to this organic farming as if it were some kind of, social movement. And then now that's being eroded, so that organic farming is losing its meaning. What do we have left? And if consumers can't find a label that they trust, they can't support these farms don't keep going.
Would you be okay with, if it is raised hydroponically, it has to be labeled that?
Personally, no. I think that's been it shouldn't have the organic label. I mean,
okay.
I think some people have suggested as a fix that hydroponic organic would be acceptable. I don't buy that. One of the things that I can't get past is that you will never, ever find a hydroponic grower advertising that. They will not say, I'm an organic, this is an organic, this is a hydroponic product, or this is a hydroponic organic product. They won't do it. They just want to lie in the bed that somebody else made. So it's an organic product. They're co-opting a label which was developed, intended, and as a soil-based farming system.
Is there any way to have the USDA reverse their decision?
Sure, absolutely. And there are senators who feel at least as strongly as the farmers do about this. I think Senator Tester had a quote within a few weeks ago, and he said, "This is absolute baloney." I think that's a strong word for senators. He said, "Really, hydroponics is labeled as organic?" Senator Leahy has been involved in this from the beginning, from the authoring of the National Organic Standards and the creation of the program in the first place. So there are definitely people out there who see this and understand it and realize that organic agriculture is incredibly important for all kinds of reasons, and that it's disappearing.
And I think there's two big reasons that have to be called out. One goes back to what we talked about earlier, that, I think it was your sister-in-law or sister that is at the Cornell University, that we don't know more than 90% of what it is that's in our soil. All that is being turned into whatever it is that goes into your blueberries or whatever the plant is. And there's so many benefits to that we don't have any idea. And when it's being fed through I think of an IV, you're being, that
Exactly.
plant is being fed, hospital food, and that's you're not going to get the same benefit. I think we can all for sure agree on that. And then the other part too is that organic farming, certainly there are big scale farms that do a good job and they use the soil and they know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
But a lot of and certainly what we've seen, being able to travel throughout the country and getting to meet, like, look at where we're sitting here. It's a farm, it's 20 acres, it's a fairly small organic farm, and you're making a living from it. If that goes away, there are hundreds of farms that now lose their farming tradition because of a deterioration of something that they relied on in that label.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Brian, as we've gone and talked to all these different people in the organic industry for the podcast here, like, the one resounding theme is it starts in the soil. Healthy soil, healthy plant, like everybody. And that's what I find so interesting is, in talking about orange groves and blueberries, like, it's the exact same thing as any other crop farmers anywhere in the world are growing. It's the same basic concept with a different crop. But it all starts in the soil. And to have something that is not even can't be in the conversation because it's not in the soil, I'm sorry, that's just not right. It's not organic farming.
It's soilless.
Oh.
That's it's a great point, I think, and I don't have the scientific background to explain it, but I certainly find it very likely that there's a direct connection between complex soil and all the microbes that live there that we barely understand and can't identify, and the human gut microbiome, which is equally complex. I think most of the cells in your body are in your gut microbiome. It evolved over eons, side by side with soil on the planet, and
Side by side because of.
Yes, yeah,
Because of soil.
right, right. And it just makes sense to me that our bodies are designed to eat food which is grown in soil. And that complex relationship between those two very, sort of wondrous ecosystems. That's to me, has to be at the heart of good nutrition. Just seems to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But isn't it wonderful that we don't understand exactly what it is, the miracle that makes things grow? Like, I think it's wonderful that we don't just have A, B, C, D happens, and then you get berries. There's so much that we don't know. It's kind of like, what percentage of the ocean has been explored? It's a drop in a bucket.
Yes.
I think it's wonderful.
It is. It's amazing.
And
we lose sight of that. We become really arrogant. We say, well, we can do this. We know how to do this. We can replicate the complexity of the natural world, and time again, we really can't, because we don't understand it. It's miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes back to what you said earlier, and this was kind of the revelation for myself as well when trying to understand soil health. And I think John Kemp was kind of, when I put two and two together, that no, I don't need to. Agronomics, listening to agronomists say calcium this, and if you're locked up here, calcium there. Right over my head. Yeah. And simplifying it down to just, you need healthy, active microbes in your soil. it doesn't get any simpler than that. It's a long, complex process to get to that point, but it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And that's...
Then you get a big, healthy plant, and that big, healthy plant collects more sunshine and creates all that and exudes it out of the root system, which just feeds the biology that's there already. And it's that, as John Kempf calls it, carbon cycling. It just keeps going and going, and it's a wonderful, crazy thing that we know very little about.
Well, and you know what it is? It's the organic system.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what you're saying is being corrupted. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's being replaced. And if you listen to the debate on this, what you'll hear from the other side is, oh, you elitists, we need more organics. Everybody needs to eat organic. Needs to be more affordable. And this is how you make it more affordable. And I find that to be such a cynical argument, because this hydroponic thing is not creating more organics. It's replacing organics. And when you do more of it, you're not getting more organics. You're getting more of a replacement. And you're basically eliminating real organics. And I've watched that happen with blueberry farms in Florida, when organic blueberries start to get appreciated and people started to realize some of the benefits of the antioxidants in blueberries and some of the incredible health benefits. Saw it as a superfood, recognizing it as a superfood. I saw a lot of conventional blueberry farmers start to transition to organics, and that's a tough process, because you got to go through 3 years of treating the plant organically before you can start to market it as organic. So usually the yield suffers and the plants go through a shock, and it's a complex, you got to learn a lot of different information. And yet these guys were willing to try and do it. But the USDA then said, well, you can just lay plastic out on your field and put plastic pots out there and put drip tubes and an inert growth media like coconut coir in that plastic pot, and you can call it organic, and you can do that right away because there's no transition period. So that eliminated all of these guys who were doing transition. And because after the capital investment, that's such a cheap growing system, nobody's planting real organic stuff anymore. So the incentives created by the USDA literally are mandating that you grow hydroponically.
And it's such a good point too, that part of the reason that people are willing to pay more for organic has been the health benefits, or the additional nutrition that is certainly perceived to be gotten from organic. And as that erodes, and I guess I'm kind of making the point for you here too, that as that erodes, so does the label.
Well, Hugh, I think we've kind of...
Sounded like a bummer, didn't it?
No, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. Uh-huh. I really do. I think there's some really disappointing things going on, and I appreciate what the Real Organic Project is trying to do and the work that's going into that. So, but I do want to just thank you so much for inviting us out here and giving us the opportunity to come to your beautiful farm here and get the history and really enjoy it, and looking forward to taking a walk out through the blueberries. Yeah, and isn't it exciting that we can walk through those blueberries and don't have to worry about, well, we just sprayed those, so don't touch them.
Right, exactly. So, just go eat them right off the bush.
So thank you so much for being on. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for